Hi, I'm James. I know a lot about fighting games despite not being very good at them. You may beat me at Tekken, but when it comes to obscure fighting game trivia, I'm god tier. It's brilliant seeing fighting games make a comeback in the previous gen of consoles. While I do enjoy mainstays like Street Fighter and Tekken, many of these games feel very safe in order to appease the widest possible audience. Some of the stranger and more unique attempts at fighting games have died before they really had their big break. So this is why I'm bringing you my top 10 worthy fighting game franchises that have died prematurely. Another one of Capcom's fighting game franchises that wasn't Street Fighter. Rival Schools was a fun, over-the-top brawler that could provide spectacular action without confusing the player with perplexing combo mechanics. The premise of Rival Schools was brilliant, as the name suggests it was all about Japanese high school students beating the hell out of each other. There was the American transfer students, the thuggish low-end school, and the sports school, each one having the appropriate stereotypical characters. One great thing about the Rival School series is that it had a more developed plot than most games of the genre, and each of the two games had a fully voiced story mode. With a likeable cast and such an interesting setup, the world needs more Rival Schools. Back when Square was associated with games other than Final Fantasy, they published Tobal No. 1 and No. 2. Created by some of the leads that worked on Tekken and Virtua Fighter, this is a perfectly legitimate 3D fighting game that is unfortunately only remembered by some for including a demo of Final Fantasy VII. Tobal's characters were designed by Dragon Ball creator Akira Toriyama, and the game featured flat shaded textures that have actually helped it age more gracefully than some of its PS1 contemporaries. This being a Square game, they felt the compulsion to throw in a surprisingly deep RPG quest mode. With free movement and high-paced attacks, I wish Tobal to return simply to diversify the 3D fighting game arena, which is currently nothing more than Tekken and Virtua Fighter. Did I mention that Tobal No. 2 has an absurdly large roster of 200 characters? This is by far the most recent game on the list. I still think it's a fair bet that we won't be getting a sequel anytime soon. It's also technically not a franchise as it's only one game, but I think I really want to talk about this game anyway. I believe that there is a very big divide between what is a fighting game and a wrestling game. But this isn't a wrestling game, this is a fighting game with a wrestling license. It has combos, super meters, and even Tekken-styled juggles. This game is practically a remake of 1995's WrestleMania the arcade game, which had many of the same designers. This is a fun, arcadey romp with a WWE license, with an exaggerated art style that is a testament to the fact that AllStars doesn't take itself too seriously. It's a pity that it fell to the standard Yuke's developed WWE series. AllStars apparently died alongside THQ. The game makes it onto this list not for being particularly exceptional, but rather because it would have truly benefited from having additional content supplied through sequels.
Now that's what this capacity crowd paid to see. The crowd has been waiting for that all night.
Yes, I'm putting this series on the list. Some people may be crying out loud at the screen right now, but I guess these people haven't actually played the second game, Challenge from the Dark Side. Being a Sega Mega CD exclusive, this is hardly surprising. While the first Eternal Champions was admittedly a mess of confusing command inputs and broken AI opponents, Challenge from the Dark Side refined every element to create a much more admirable product. When actually given some attention, Eternal Champions was an innovative game featuring character buffs, offensive nerfs, projectile reflection and extensive command lists. On top of all this, it had a surprisingly interesting story premise, in which warriors from across time met an untimely demise and must fight for a second chance at life in order to change the world. Eternal Champions CD still wasn't perfect, but it was proof that the franchise had potential. It is for this reason why, much like its cast of characters, it deserves a second chance at life. A seriously underrated series that has been constantly bashed by people who have never actually played it. The EX series isn't developed by Capcom, but rather Arika, a developer led by Street Fighter II's lead designers. It is routinely dismissed solely because of its use of polygons. While it may be true that its graphics haven't aged particularly well, the same cannot be said for its music, character design and combat systems. Super cancels are the order of the day in Street Fighter EX, and it's truly satisfying to land one super combo only for it to evolve into another. EX also has a roster of original characters not owned by Capcom. Classic characters like Volcano Rosso, Dokkan Dark, and of course Skullomania. These characters are not owned by Capcom, so will probably never make an appearance in any version of Street Fighter 4 ever. This is truly criminal, as I'd argue that characters like Kairi are far more interesting than Abel and whatever. I'll go out with the incredibly bold statement that the EX games have by far the greatest soundtracks of the entire Street Fighter series. Granted, Fatal Fury characters live on in the King of Fighters series, which is indeed still going very strong. However, it's been 15 years since the last standalone Fatal Fury game, and we're long overdue for a new one. I've always admired this series for its willingness to try new things. Previous games have included multiple planes and even a system for ring outs. The last game we received was the seminal Garou, Mark of the Wolves, which set the game in a new generation. Unfortunately, this next generation Fatal Fury ended right there. What a tease. It's time for SNK to reintroduce their franchises beyond the KOF crossovers. Street Fighter's horror-themed sibling franchise, Darkstalkers took traditional horror lore with the Universal movie monsters and twisted it all into something completely brilliant. Initially nothing more than a tech demo for Capcom's CPS2 hardware, Darkstalkers backed up its stunning sprite work and animation with solid gameplay. Performing combos was as simple as understanding that any attacks from weak to strong would link, letting even novices perform basic attack strings. The characters were highly maneuverable and had a wealth of meter-based enhanced attacks to give the player plenty of options during combat. Darkstalkers is now regulated to cameos and crossover games like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Project X Zone, but remains a huge hit with fighting game fans. Demand for a new Darkstalkers game has existed ever since Street Fighter 4 was released. Hopefully it's about time Capcom sees the light and pulls Darkstalkers out from under Street Fighter's shadow. 魂と血の返済を求める。命令にない。 Power Stone was a series that had the potential to challenge Super Smash Bros. As a party mainstay. The original game was a one-on-one fighter that gave the player free movement around the environment. The environment was the main attraction here, with all kinds of different weapons and the titular Power Stones. Collect all 3 of these in a fight and you transform into an alternate, super powerful character for a temporary period. The breakthrough game, however, was the sequel, Power Stone 2. Realising the potential of the open environment, this game introduced 4 character free-falls in awe-inspiring, dynamically changing environments. Had Capcom stuck with this game beyond the death of the Dreamcast, we could have been enjoying Power Stone 6 with our next alcohol-infused party, but sadly this was never the case.
But it's not unstoppable. Aim for its head.
Yahoo! 負けないわよ。
Let the battle begin.
Fighter's Destiny is unique because it wasn't about depleting the enemy's life bar, although that is an option. Fighter's Destiny operated on a point system, more like an Olympic martial arts event. You earn set points for standard knockouts, but also for knockdowns, ring outs, successful throws, and landing elaborate special attacks. The real unusual thing was its combination of realistic tournament-style combat with the standard over-the-top character designs you'd usually expect from the genre. The series most likely died because it was a fighting game on the N64. Most people playing fighting games in the mid to late 90s most likely had a PS1 or Saturn. It had a spiritual sequel that was arcade exclusive called Toy Fighter, which featured the same points-based gameplay, but rather in a Toy Story-like world. Fighter's Destiny wasn't the first game to try and emulate an Olympic-style points system, but it was still a particularly enjoyable one. The juxtaposition of realistic combat with crazy characters made it all the more appealing. With competitive fighting games more popular than ever thanks to internet streams, Fighter's Destiny deserves a second chance. Bushido Blade was another fighting game that attempted realism. Bushido Blade is a true samurai simulation where a single stroke of the blade can kill you. You must carefully defend and parry while planning each individual attack. While all fighting games are improved through multiplayer, this is particularly true for Bushido Blade, because it really helps if you understand the psychology of your opponent. The environments are large and can have a factor in fights. Despite what the game looks like, it is set in the modern day. This becomes apparent when you encounter characters wielding assault rifles. There are multiple weapons which are all highly diverse and handled differently. If I were to compare the gameplay in Bushido Blade to anything else, it wouldn't be Soul Calibur or Samurai Showdown, but rather Dark Souls. Every attack is a commitment and one wrong move can get you killed. Bushido Blade deserves a sequel because it would truly benefit from modern physics engines. The closest thing we have are the Deadliest Warrior games. It's pretty sad.
身の程知らずね。はっはっはっはいはいあなたが出てきたということは、彼は近くにいるわね。